Good afternoon, everyone. With the posted time having arrived, I'll call the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting for Monday, November 1st, 2021 to order. A quorum of members is present. The one item on our agenda this evening is a revocation hearing pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 1.125.12, Section 2, on notice of intention to revoke or suspend the Class B beer and liquor license of Alan Waller doing business as 6th Street Pub, premises located at 2002 North 6th Street, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403, for failure to be open in violation of Wausau Municipal Code Section 5.64.160, abandonment of premises. This is actually an official hearing. We will take sworn testimony from both sides. This is a license hearing pursuant to Chapter 125.12 of the Wisconsin statutes. A summons and complaint has been filed against Alan Waller doing business as the 6th Street Pub. Let it be noted for the record that the following committee members are present: Patrick Peckham, Dawn Herbst, James Wadinsky, Becky McElhaney, and Lisa Rasmussen, along with our counsel, Nathan Miller. Ms. Alfonso, would you state the other appearances?
Yes. Mr. Alan Wohler is here in person, and he is not represented by counsel. And then, of course, as you noted, I'm here representing the city of Wausau, Tara Alfonso. And then the city would have two witnesses this evening for the hearing, Lieutenant Michael Felder and Captain Todd Baton.
Okay, thank you. I'm Lisa Rasmussen, Chairperson of the Public Health and Safety Committee for the City of Wausau. Mr. Alan Waller, a summons and complaint has been filed against you. Under the provisions of Section 125.12 of the Wisconsin statutes, this hearing has been convened for the purpose of determining whether any of the charges against you are true and to make a recommendation based on the determination. This committee will examine all evidence concerning charges through inquiry to both sides. The committee will evaluate and then impartially weigh the evidence. It will determine whether or not any of the charges have been proven solely upon the evidence introduced in this hearing. This hearing is open to the public. This proceeding is being digitally recorded. You have elected not to be represented by an attorney and are appearing pro se. Tara Alfonso is here as the prosecutor and will present the case against you to the committee. Nathan Miller is present and will serve as legal advisor to this committee and to the council. Nathan Miller will advise the committee on questions of law and procedure and may also direct questions to witnesses on behalf of the committee. You may present evidence, call and examine witnesses, and cross-examine witnesses against you. All witnesses will be sworn. Subject to a motion for consideration by the full committee made by a member of this committee, I will rule upon questions, objections, and motions as to procedural matters, admissibility of evidence, and similar issues. All objections, questions, and motions shall be directed to me. Evidence shall be admitted which has reasonable probative value, but immaterial, irrelevant, and unduly repetitious testimony shall be excluded. Basic principles of relevancy, materiality, and probative force shall govern the proof of all decisions of fact. You may testify on your behalf. With regard to the charges against you, however, what you say will be considered as evidence. Further, if you do testify, you may be cross-examined. If a charge or charges against you are proven, you are advised that the committee may recommend to the Common Council that your license be suspended or revoked, and that the Common Council may accept or reject such a recommendation and may determine upon such recommendation whether your license shall be suspended or revoked. You have been served with a copy of the summons and complaint which has been filed with the committee for determination. I now request the clerk to append as an exhibit to the record a copy of the summons and complaint. Do you admit to any of the allegations in the summons and complaint, Mr. Waller?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay.
Which ones?
Which specific allegations on the summons and complaint, Mr. Waller? Are you stipulating to all of them as factual?
I have not been open, lack of my health and employees. That's all I have to worry about. And I hope I get some leniency. I'm trying to get employees because my health, I've ended up on dialysis and I cannot work. And trying to find help is very strenuous.
Okay.
Is Mr. Wohler willing to indicate how long it has been since he has been open and whether or not he has maintained his distributor contracts?
If you want to respond to her question, we'll have Ms. Alfonso present her witnesses if,
I
You have-
haven't been open since an officer called me and said he had to be open 30 days. So I opened up once a night, a month. Then I get another officer to call me and tells me, no, you can't do that either.
no, the statute says you have to be, get open and stay open consistently. When was your last open date?
The day after the officer called me, I opened up that following, well, actually, I think it's that night. I think it was on a Monday. And I have I don't have the date, but when the officer called me, that was my last night.
So you opened for one night after the phone call?
Correct.
Okay. And do you have active contractors with, contracts with distributors presently?
Yes, I can order and my alcohol, yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Miller. You had a question?
Not anymore.
Okay. Okay. I'll ask Ms. Alfonso to go ahead and present evidence as to the charges before the committee. Do you want to go ahead and call your first witness?
Yes, the city calls Captain Todd Baton. Ms. Gady, is there a way we can pre-mark exhibits so I don't go up and down there every time?
Sure.
Do you want me to bring them all up? And then I'll give Mr. or,
We'll have Mr. Miller come down and get them. You don't have to step up.
so they should go in order. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, and 5. And then I'll give you a set of these. This is going to be 1,
This whole thing is 4. Okay. And then 5 is over there. Okay.
Okay, so we'll pre-mark all 5 exhibits. And we'll bring up Captain Baton. And after the, and we'll, clerk will swear in Captain Baton. Yep, right here's fine.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you are about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Sure. Mr. Wohler, this is the exhibits that have been pre-marked. They're not admitting yet that there are things I was going to go through with the 2 witnesses. So I just informally number them for you, so that you know that. Would you state, can you hear, Mary?
I can, yeah, if it's close to you.
Would you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
Todd Baton, Toddbaeten.
And are you a resident of the city of Wausau?
Yes, I am.
Okay, how long have you been a resident here?
Over 19 years now.
And what is your occupation?
I am currently the patrol captain at the Wausau Police Department.
Okay. And how long have you been employed there?
I have been with Wausau Police Department since 2002.
And what would your general duties as patrol captain be?
As the patrol captain, I have accountability and stewardship over our uniformed patrol bureau, so all of our uniformed officers that are out in the field taking calls.
All right. And as a patrol captain for the city of Wausau, are you familiar with the efforts that the city undertakes to enforce state laws and ordinances concerning taverns and bars and other places where liquor is sold?
Yes, I am.
And in addition to just enforcement of ordinances, do the officers sometimes perform bar checks or extra patrols at bars and taverns?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And how do you become aware of the activities of the department officers and lieutenants concerning the enforcement or compliance of ordinances and state law concerning liquor?
It's often done through informal briefings with the patrol lieutenants, but primarily it is done through via a monthly report that's compiled by Lieutenant Felder, in which he documents all of the calls for service that are occurring in and around or stemming from the licensed establishments in the community.
And is that a requirement of his job as a lieutenant?
Correct, that's one of his assignments that he's been given.
And that is a unique function to him?
Correct.
In the department? Okay. And and you review those reports regularly?
Yes.
And if a report is interesting to you, do you have access to all the underlying records that you can check to get more information?
Yes, through our records management system, our RMS system, or the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch system, I have access to those records.
Okay. Now, when city police officers do police investigations or police calls at bars or taverns or do bar checks or extra patrols, are they required to make records of those things?
Yes, they are.
And how are those records kept?
So those records are generally kept through that CAD system that I had mentioned, the computer-aided dispatch system. There'll be a computer entry made that serves as a record of that event or that action that they took.
And then I guess additional records would be made, like police reports as the case may require?
Correct. As appropriate, there may be additional documentation as the situation would dictate.
Okay. And are officers required to make those reports at or near the time of the investigation or check?
Yes, they are.
And are these made in the course of the department's regular business?
Yes.
And do you know how long are the records maintained?
So the CAD records, or the computer-aided dispatch records, those are kept minimally for 7 years. The CAD records are actually property of the Marathon County Sheriff's Department, who does dispatching services for us. But in reaching out with my counterpart, the captain of the Communications Bureau, he advises me that they generally don't purge any of those records, but minimally they would be kept 7 years.
And you have access to those records, even the CAD calls then?
Correct.
Even though they're maintained by the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And are you familiar with Alan Wohler?
Simply as the licensee or the proprietor of 6th Street Pub, although I do not believe we've ever met in person.
And 6th Street Pub, is that within the corporate city limits of the city of Wausau?
Yes, it is. I believe it's located at 2002 North 6th Street.
May I have a moment? Is it okay if I get the pre-marked exhibits so I can? As far as exhibit number 1 and 2, the city does not need those, but would request that this committee enter those as self-authenticating documents as exceptions to the hearsay rule. They are certified by the deputy clerk. The first exhibit is a copy of Alan Wohler's license issued by the city for this liquor license here, and the second is a certified copy from our clerk's office of the ordinance regarding abandonment of premises.
Okay.
Would those be accepted
Yes,
then? Okay.
we'll accept those.
Thank you. Okay. Now, Officer I'm sorry. Captain Baton, I'm going to show you.
You want me to come down there tomorrow?
No. I just have, okay. I'm going to show you what's been pre-marked as exhibit number 3. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And what is that document?
This would be a compilation or a list of extra patrols or bar checks, business checks that were conducted at North 6th Street between May 1st and I believe it was October 7th of this year.
Okay, and then who compiled that list?
I did.
You did. And did you review those records or make that exhibit in conjunction with a complaint filed by you in today's proceedings?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And that summary that you have in front of you that we've pre-marked as exhibit number 3 for identification purposes, was that attached to the copy of the complaint that
Yes.
you filed? Okay, and based on your review of that summary, how many visits did officers make to 6th Street Pub?
Between that time period, again, of May 1st, 2021 and October 7th, there were 107 checks conducted or visits conducted to that establishment.
Okay, now there is a handwritten note next to those records identified by file numbers that says closed. Who made that notation?
That was me.
Okay, and what does that mean?
So when I compiled this list, this was meant to be more of a cursory looking over to see, really get an idea of how many times our officers had visited there. And instead of printing out the 100 plus pages that it was at the time, I simply clicked on each of these calls as they appeared on my screen, went into that CAD, that individual CAD call, so I could see any comments that the officer would have typed in from their mobile data computer in the squad to ascertain that they typed something similar to business closed or no lights on or no activity, something that was similar to that. And that's what I noticed in each of these circumstances, or incidents rather.
And did you request that those extra patrols or business checks be made at 6th Street Pub during that time period?
Correct. I had given the directive that the evening patrol lieutenants assign officers to conduct those extra patrols at that establishment to ascertain if they were open or closed.
And what was it that brought you to wonder whether that establishment was open or closed?
Well, it had been brought to my attention through these regular updates through the monthly tavern reports, communications with supervisors, that 6th Street Pub had been closed, or at least there seemed to have been no activity there for an inordinate amount of time.
Okay. And so you conducted those checks or had those done. And did you find, what was the information that you got from the CAD calls and all that you looked at?
Sure. So in each of the 107 calls that were conducted or entered at that establishment, the business was closed each time the officers went to check.
Each and every time?
Each of the 107 times.
During that
They did
period?
not notice the business open any one of those times.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you, and so then when I guess you filed the complaint that was attached to it, did it subsequently come to your attention any information concerning whether that summary was fully comprehensive?
Yeah, I later learned that there was actually some discrepancy there, that there were a few more, I believe maybe half a dozen more occasions that checks had been conducted and the business was found to be closed as well, that had not been included, or that I had not included on this original summary.
Okay. And would you say that summary is accurate in all other respects other than it's missing maybe 6 or so?
Yes.
Okay. And now, in the course of looking into the matter of whether the bar has been open, did you ever direct anyone under your supervision to contact Mr. Wohler?
Yes, I had asked Lieutenant Felder to attempt contact with Mr. Wohler, just to, more of a fact-finding, find out what the circumstances were surrounding the business.
And did Lieutenant Felder ever report back to you?
Yes, I believe it was on July 9th, I received an email from him indicating he was able to have contact with Mr. Wohler the previous day or the previous evening.
All right. And what kind of information, if any, did he provide you that he obtained, or how was that relayed to you?
So in the email, it sounds like that the communication given to Lieutenant Felder from Mr. Wohler was that the establishment had not been open for quite some time. In fact, I want to say it was perhaps from August of 2020, and that there were not current contracts with alcohol distributors at that time. But I believe that there were perhaps some mitigating circumstances. I believe there was something about some poor health and some incidents such as that were factors in that as well in some of those decisions.
And was that information that you obtained from Lieutenant Felder important to you in filing your complaint?
Yes, it was.
Now, have you ever had contact with Mr. Wohler yourself?
I did.
And approximately when was that?
So I would say, I don't recall exactly when it was, but it was probably several weeks after or more after Lieutenant Felder had reported back via email. I was able to have telephone contact with Mr. Wohler, just revisiting this topic again, acknowledging that I was aware he had spoken with Lieutenant Felder, and that we had been conducting some checks and noticed that the business had appeared closed each time our officers had been there, and asking them really what the intentions were surrounding that alcohol license, encouraging them to work with the city clerk's office if there were some other circumstances that needed to be resolved regarding that.
And what, if anything, notable did he tell you about the 6th Street pub?
I don't recall the exact words that he said, but I mean, it was talking about, hey, I'm trying to find some employees. There were some health issues, I believe, that were factors as well in there, but then indicated that he was trying to be open periodically for his customers to come in, and but that this was an intermittent action.
I have no further questions of Captain Baton.
Okay. Mr. Waller, do you have any questions for Lieutenant Baton, or Captain Baton, sorry?
Nope.
Okay. Committee members, do you have any questions for Captain Baton? Mr. Miller, do you have any?
No.
Okay. Captain Baton, you can step down.
Chairperson,
Yes.
I would request that Exhibit 3 be entered into evidence.
Is that the patrol log?
Give 1 and 2 and 3 back
Yep.
to them because they haven't even seen it yet. Thank you very kindly, sir.
We'll accept those documents.
Thank you.
You could go ahead with your second witness.
Okay, the city would call Lieutenant Michael Felder.
The clerk will swear in Lieutenant Felder.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
Michael Felder, Michael Felder.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a police officer with the city of Wausau, currently a patrol lieutenant.
And how long have you been employed with the city of Wausau?
I'm in my 29th year.
And do you have any special assignments as a lieutenant that you perform?
Yes, I do the bar check report.
And what goes into that, preparing them?
So every month, I look at every bar that's licensed in the city and look at all the calls at each of those places and make a determination as to whether or not it's something of significant value to this committee, and then report on that, do a synopsis of the call.
And I guess you would also report to your superiors like Captain Baton?
Yes.
Okay. And so it's safe to say that then you're pretty familiar with the city's activities and enforcing its ordinances and state statutes regarding establishments that have liquor licenses.
Yes.
All right. And are you familiar with an establishment known as the 6th Street Pub?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with that place?
Well, obviously being on patrol here for so long, I know where it is. I've driven past it thousands of times probably. But more recently, it came of light, probably as an observance during compiling the bar report of no activity at that place, which is normally a good thing. I think also one thing that affected that is the recent incident with the case with the wagon wheel having been abandoned as well, or found that it had been abandoned. So that kind of raised some eyebrows, I think, of what's going on there, because it doesn't look like it's been open at all, so.
And in that connection, being familiar with the 6th Street Pub, you're familiar with Mr. Wohler?
By name, I don't remember ever having met him before.
And then, did Captain Baton ask you to have an officer or officers make extra patrols or bar checks by the 6th Street Pub?
Yes, so that bar is in what we consider our patrol sector A. And so I supervise a night shift. So I had our officer that's assigned to A, or whoever's covering A, do that extra patrol of the bar, and I also requested that of the other night shift as well.
And that was for the purpose of determining whether or not that establishment was ever open?
Correct.
Okay. And you heard the testimony of Captain Baton. The city officers are required, I guess, to keep records of matters relating to their calls for service or bar checks and things like that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have access to those records?
Yes, I do.
All right. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as pre-marked as exhibit number 4 for identification purposes. Do you recognize, take a minute and look through that, do you recognize those documents?
Yes.
And what are those exactly?
So the first few pages are the list that Captain Baton had compiled regarding the extra patrols at the 6th Street Pub at 2002 North 6th Street. And then the subsequent packets are the individual printouts of each of those extra patrol calls that I printed out when trying to verify this list. Although when I was going through the verification process, I used a little bit different. I used a different CAD program to do the search. I was a little more detailed on the date and time, where I started at midnight of the first of the month and 11:59 of the last day of the month for my searches, and I wound up coming up with 6 extra things that weren't on this list.
And you actually did the comparison of the summary then and pulled up the actual underlying CAD calls.
Correct.
And your review of those CAD calls, what did they demonstrate to you?
That overwhelmingly, or nearly every time, they were either verbatim closed or something along the same similarity, that no activity, nothing that said they appeared to be open for business.
So not one of those CAD calls documents that officers observed the establishment open?
Correct.
And I guess just to confirm the time frame for those records with you?
I started on May 1st, 2021, and went until October 7th, 2021.
Okay. And has anyone in the department gone by there since the last CAD call that is there? What is that, the 7th, you said?
Yeah, yes, I checked from the 8th till the end of October 2021. There were 8 more checks at the bar. All of them were consistent in saying it was closed.
Now, at some point this year, were you asked to make contact with Mr. Alan Wohler?
Yes,
And who asked you?
Captain Baton.
Okay. And did you make contact with him?
I did.
And how did you make that contact?
So I use our Evolve program, or my access to Evolve, that the city clerk, I believe, coordinates. That's where I learned who the license holder is, who the agent is. It was Mr. Waller. That's where I got the phone number from. I tried calling him in May of 2021 and got no answer, left a voicemail, didn't get a return. So then I called him again in June 8th of 2021. I think Captain Baton said July, but it was in June as far as my recollection goes. And I spoke to him on that day.
Okay, and did he identify himself to you on the phone as Mr. Alan Wohler?
Yes,
All right. And about how long do you think you spoke with him at that time?
about a half hour.
And how would you describe his level of cooperation with you during that phone call?
Fine, he was cordial. We had
So what, if anything, did he say to you about the 6th Street Pub during that conversation?
well, he admitted he hadn't been open since August of 2020. He said he had plans of opening again, but hadn't yet. He did cite kidney dialysis and a broken leg as part of his health problems as part of that. Obviously, COVID was also a concern as far as opening and getting help and things along those lines. I asked him if he had kept his distributorship going, and at that time he said he had not, but he could get it started with a phone call. And he had stock on hand, which I assumed he meant liquor, because as far as making the phone call, it would be for fresh beer. And that was the majority of our conversation was around that. At one point, he did ask why I was inquiring, and I informed him about the ordinance of abandonment and how being closed for a longer period of time could fall under that ordinance. He kind of suggested, well, what if I'm open once a month or something like that? And I had the prior knowledge that there's wording in the ordinance that prohibits that kind of behavior. And I said, well, I think you'd be working the system if you did something like that. And he expressed an opinion of how he felt the city was working the system with him in regards to some permitting with he had a fire in the upper part of the building or something, and he was seeming to have some problems with permitting with the city in regards to repairing that or fixing that damage.
Did you understand what that meant?
I knew there had been a fire there. I didn't know what problems he might be having.
And then, did you ask him during that conversation whether he had any plans to sell his business?
Yes, I asked him that. He said he had someone the month prior, which would have been in May, that was interested, but they couldn't come up with the cash. And he thought that if he could sell the bar, he'd retire.
And did you make a record of this phone conversation you had with Mr. Wohler?
I did I guess you'd call a narrative summary, and I emailed that to Captain Baton, excuse me.
And did you make that summary at or near the time of the phone call?
Yeah, it was that night that I did it.
I'm going to show you what we've had marked as exhibit number 5 for identification purposes. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's the summary report that I attached to an email to
And
Captain Baton.
take a quick look. Would you say that that's a true and correct copy?
Yes.
All right. Let me just double check my list here. All right, have no further questions.
Mr. Waller, do you have any questions for Lieutenant Felder?
Nope.
Committee members, do you have any questions for Lieutenant Felder? Mr. Miller, do you have any?
I think just one.
Okay, go ahead.
Previously, you said that you had talked to him about the fact that somebody might be wanting to purchase the bar. Did he have any sort of plan for actually reopening the bar if a purchase fell through or anything like that?
He didn't mention anything about reopening in regards to the purchase. The best I could get him to say was that he planned on reopening, but he couldn't give me a date as to when that would happen.
Any other, I guess, concrete steps to show that he was going to reopen?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. With no other,
One follow-up question.
go ahead.
Exhibit number 4, the CAD calls, are those true and correct copies of the documents that you pulled for today's hearing?
Yes.
Okay. May we have exhibits number 4 and 5 entered into the record?
Yes,
please?
we'll accept both.
Thank you. And then the city has nothing further.
Okay. All right. Mr. Waller, do you wish to offer testimony on your own behalf in this hearing?
I'd just like to know what happens to my business as if yanking my license. I said if I'd find a bartender, I've got $30,000 worth of liquor inventory that cannot be returned. And I'd like to get rid of that, and that's a big issue of trying to sell the bar, just because they have to buy the existing inventory. I said, I don't know when I can open. You know, I said, if my health and my immune system, I shouldn't be around too many people in that instance, so I have to have somebody else do the work for me. So it's tough, it's difficult. I think it's prejudice against bars, saying you have to have this 30 days, you have to be open. They tell me, I ask, and they say, well, regular hours. What are regular hours? I'm trying to work around this, and I'm not getting a straight answer from anybody.
So before we keep going any further, I'm not sure if you want to do any testimony because you're not sworn in right now. And right now what you're saying isn't really testimony, so I'm now cutting you off to figure out if you have any testimony, you can share that, but we need to swear you in first for the record.
I have no dispute of any allegations that have come for me. No, I have no problem with it. It's just my circumstances. I just hope for leniency.
All right. Committee members, any questions for Mr. Waller? I have only one, or I guess a couple. Mr. Waller, you're aware that your Class B beer and liquor license cannot be sold or transferred to a new tavern owner, correct?
Correct.
And that any new owner, if the bar were sold, would have to reapply to this committee anyway, correct?
Correct. The business is worth more money having an actual license than it is a running business.
Okay. Mr. Miller, do you have any questions for Mr. Waller?
No?
Okay. With that, that concludes witness testimony. The committee will deliberate and make its decision in closed session, and then return to this chamber to read their findings. With that, we have a motion, I'll accept a motion to convene in closed session. Would someone read the motion? Go ahead, Jim.
Just number 1.
Number 2.
Closed session. Pursuant to section 19.85 sub 1 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes, deliberating concerning a case which was the subject of any jurisdictional or quasi-jurisdictional trial or hearing before that governmental body.
Okay, we have a motion for closed session. Is there a second? Second by Herbst. Roll call vote for closed session. Herbst? Peckham? McElhaney? Wodinski?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. Committee will convene in the Maple Room and will return to this chamber after its deliberation.